It is my pleasure to welcome viewers to today's Education USA Interactive Series web chat on U.S. campus culture. My name is Alfred Boll, representing Education USA in the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs at the United States Department of State. Education USA is the department's network of international student advising centers in nearly every country of the world. Our more than 550 dedicated academic advisors help international students and their families learn about the admissions process to U.S. universities. Advisors provide accurate, comprehensive, and current information about the full range of academic programs offered by the more than 4,700 accredited U.S. higher education institutions. Today's interactive webinar is part of a series aimed at providing prospective students and their families with up-to-date information about current topics related to U.S. higher education. Throughout the program, our panelists will answer questions that viewers post in the Education USA interactive chat room at educationusa.state.gov/interactive. Just click on Register at the bottom of the chat room box to join the conversation. You can also pose your questions on Twitter using the Education USA hashtag. Many international students and their parents wonder what it is really like to study at a college or university in the United States. Today's online discussion will allow you to ask questions about daily academic and campus life at U.S. universities and learn about what U.S. universities are doing to welcome international students. As we get started, we want to send a special greeting to the students and parents who are gathered in viewing groups at Education USA advising centers. Joining us on camera during this hour will be students and parents at the American Center in Moscow. Welcome, Moscow. We look forward to hearing from you throughout the program. Today we are pleased to have joining us in the studio Alina Pak. Alina is an international student from Moscow who is now attending Duke University, where she is in her senior year studying public policy. On campus, Alina is a member of the Model UN team and the Student Life Programming Committee. Seated next to Alina is Shaun Ee. Shaun is an international student from Singapore who graduated just 1 month ago from Washington University in St. Louis, Missouri. He majored in international and area studies, specializing in conflict and democracy in East Africa. While on campus, his extracurricular activities included performance or slam poetry, as well as being a member of a fraternity. We have several other speakers who are joining us remotely. Michael Wilhelm is the Associate Vice Chancellor of International Programs at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, and is directly responsible for education abroad, international student and scholar services, and the English as a Second Language program. Joining us from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, is Emily Markham. Emily is Assistant Director of Global Engagement at Roche College in Pittsburgh. In this role, she leads and supports various international education initiatives and campus programming efforts designed to build connections between scholars on campus and with the greater Pittsburgh community. Welcome to all our panelists. Let's get started. Let me start with you, Alina and Shaun. What was it like when you first arrived on college campus? Alina.
Thank you, Alfred, for the introduction. My experience arriving at Duke was somewhat of a unique. I had somewhat of a unique perspective because the year before I was actually able to do a summer camp for prospective students, a lot of whom were international. So I was familiar with the campus, and once I arrived, there was also an orientation for international students like me to get us acquainted with each other in the campus, and as well as organized trips to banks, Target, the Duke Visa services, and the like.
Okay, excellent. So it wasn't completely new when you arrived?
Yeah, it was very comfortable, convenient for me. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Shaun?
So for myself, it was actually something of a new experience. This was my second time in the United States. I'd been to California and the West Coast before, but only for vacation. And there were a lot of little things to adapt to. It wasn't a total surprise because I speak English as my native language, but in terms of just maybe the social life and social expectations, there were a lot of subtle differences. People in Singapore are a lot less friendly than in the Midwest, for one. But I think Washington University did a really good job of preparing us for life in the US because there were a lot of orientation programs, 1.5 weeks worth, and I think those were really instrumental in kind of getting me settled and getting started.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. So let me turn to Emily. Emily, what do schools do to facilitate the arrival of international students?
So it really starts with the recruitment effort, and we do try to prepare students from before they arrive on campus with background information on what to expect when they arrive, what to pack, what the campus is really like. And then once they arrive, we do have a great orientation session where they get to meet other students. They meet with our global engagement and our international student services staff. And it's a way to learn about culture on campus, American culture, what it's like at La Roche. We are a very small liberal arts school based just outside of Pittsburgh. So we're in more of a residential neighborhood, but we're very close to the city center. So we provide them with some background on that area and what it's like to go to school, as well as some information about their immigration status and as an international student coming to school for the first time, what that experience might be like. Including academic standards and other aspects of campus culture.
Thank you very much, Emily. Just to follow up, being a smaller school, is that different from an experience a student would have at a much bigger school?
Likely, yes. So even from my own personal experience, I went to a smaller school, so that's kind of where my experience lies. But I would imagine that larger schools, while they do provide similar types of opportunities through orientation and preparation, what's nice about La Roche is that it is such a small and kind of more intimate environment. So you have the opportunity to really build great relationships with the staff and fellow students. And despite being such a small school, we have a very large international student population. About 20% of our student population is international. So it really has kind of a global atmosphere when you step on campus.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. Now let's take some questions from our online viewers. So for the students, this question is directed at the two of you here. What was the biggest difference you experienced between classrooms in the United States and where you're from, so in Russia and Singapore? Sean, can I start with you?
Absolutely. So I would say that the biggest difference was classroom participation, I think. In Singapore, that is something that happens, but I think it's much less of an expectation than it is in the US. In the US, there are, especially in smaller classes, you're really expected to speak up. If not, you're going to lose a bunch of marks, and that can be a significant chunk of your grade, like 40 or 50%. So that was probably one of the biggest changes, and I'm not someone who's naturally very outspoken, so it took a while for me to get adjusted to that. But honestly, if you talk to your professor about it and about your different cultural expectations, they're willing to accommodate you a lot of the time.
Okay, nice to hear. Alina?
So I definitely agree with you on the participation point. It is much less of an expectations back and home for me too, and it took a while adjusting to the fact that as much as half of your grade can be just participation. However, the biggest difference for me was how approachable U.S. professors feel in relation to teachers back in Russia. For example, Duke sponsors a faculty lunch program where you can actually get university to pay for you to have lunch with your professors to get to know them on a personal level, which is great because free food, and also it's an amazing opportunity to get to know some of the best faculty in the United States.
So a quick follow-up question. Because participation is so important, do professors help you with that? Do they ensure that everybody gets an equal opportunity to participate?
In my experience, all of the professors have been really accommodating with that, and I have a bunch of friends who do not like to participate as much as other people. So yeah, my professors have personally always been very open to students coming up to them after class discussing potential personal problems they might have with participation.
So if you're a shy student, there are accommodations for that. Sean, was that also your experience?
Yeah.
Or?
Obviously, you're going to have to push yourself a bit, and you kind of have to meet each other halfway. It's not going to be all on the professor to make life easy for you, but if you're putting in the effort and they know that you're trying to contribute, I think that's the biggest thing that lets them know that you're really committed, and it's just a cultural or a personality thing that maybe prevents you from participating as often.
Okay, thank you. Very, very interesting answers. Thank you. Okay, so we have a question from IRC Kigali. How do universities protect students from discrimination, and how do they foster a multicultural environment? Emily, can we start with you?
Sure. So as I mentioned, La Roche has quite a large international student population to begin with, and we do strive to provide a welcoming environment for international students. So we work with faculty and students to develop programming that has a cultural spin to bring awareness to the multicultural nature of our campus. And international students are embraced throughout campus. There are a number of student organizations that have an international focus and are made up of international students and American students alike. So it really is a way to spread a greater awareness about different cultures, while also creating that kind of multicultural feel on campus. And in terms of kind of preventing discrimination, we do try to provide awareness opportunities for faculty and students and staff to learn about different cultures, to kind of stem some of that discrimination from the start.
Okay, thank you very much, Emily. Let me turn to the two of you, Alina and Shaun. Did you experience this? Did you see the university have certain policies? Alina?
I personally never experienced any discrimination based on my national identity, and I think Duke does a really good job at promoting awareness about other cultures. For example, we have multiple performing arts showcases, international fairs. There is what Duke calls an iHouse, which is a house geared towards international students where people can go to practice their English or other languages and talk and get to know each other, as well as multiple social living groups that are also geared towards either international students or people coming from different cultures.
Okay, fantastic. Shaun?
Yeah, I want to absolutely agree with that. We don't have an iHouse or anything, but we do have a lot of different cultural groups. So, for example, I was part of the Singapore Students Association on campus, and that really helped in terms of finding my place. But also, I think there's this general cultural atmosphere which is very accepting of difference on a lot of US universities. And I have personally never experienced discrimination, but in the few instances where I've heard that maybe someone had an unfortunate encounter of some kind, most of the time their friends are more than willing to step in and intervene on their behalf. So it's this thing where people are willing to speak out for each other, and I think that's really productive.
Okay, thank you both very much. Now another online question. And this, I think, is also directed at the students. What is the teaching style like in the United States? What about class participation? So you've talked about that that's important, but how are tests and exams fit into that? How do they fit into that? Are you expected to work with other students during class? What was the teaching style, Alina?
I would say that an American classroom is much more of a multitasking experience than a Russian classroom because as much as participation matters, tests and exams definitely play a huge role, and you will just not do well unless you do well in all the aspects of the class and not just one. So you can't cram a semester full of material into one night of studying and pass a test. That's not how this works. So you have to put in a consistent effort. It's what my experience has been.
Okay, consistent effort. Shaun?
Yeah, I want to second that. I think you need a very holistic approach to studying. In Singapore, there were times when I could get by with just being well, I'm just gonna not do my work for a couple of weeks and then I'll catch up and everything will be fine. That's a lot harder in the US, but one thing I do want to emphasize is I think it also really depends on the kind of class or subject you're taking. So science and tech classes are going to be big lectures a lot more of the time. Humanities classes like history or language classes are almost always small seminar classes, maybe 15 people at the maximum. And so participation can matter a lot more in those. Yeah.
Thank you both. Emily, let me ask you from the university's standpoint. Do schools tell professors what they need to do, how they need to structure their class, how grading is done, or is it completely up to professors?
So there are standards in place that faculty need to adhere by, academic standards and so forth. But in terms of how they stylistically frame the course, that often is left to the professor. And I would agree that there's more of a kind of holistic approach to it. Being a small school, we have a student faculty ratio of about 12:1. So just about all of our classes are quite small. So the participation of the student is very important. And we try to have a very interactive type of atmosphere. That is something that's really pushed upon throughout the campus is having a really interactive student involvement within their courses to help prepare them for that next step.
Thank you very much, Emily. So another question from our viewers online. It seems like Americans are usually laid back. Does that mean you call professors by their first names? How does the relationship between a professor and a student differ in the United States? Very good question. Shaun.
Yeah, so I think I've had maybe 2 professors that I've called by their first names. So usually I would say some are okay with it, but you have to wait for them to tell you that they're okay with it. But I think, as Alina mentioned earlier, a lot of professors are very approachable, and they do make an effort to make sure that they know the students and they have a relationship with the students. I think it's really important actually to build a relationship with your professors by going to their office hours, so on and so forth, because that's something that doesn't happen always. And you'll find that you're behind on recommendations and people who can support you for later opportunities if you don't do that.
Thank you. Alina.
Yeah, so definitely do not call your professor by your first name without asking first. I would err on the side of a more formal approach, and unless told otherwise. So several of my professors have indeed requested that students call them by their first name, but that has not been the general trend. And I would also echo Shaun's sentiment in that it is quite easy to build, it is much easier than it is in many other cultures to build a closer relationship with your professor. But for me, what is important to remember is that it is still a professional and academic relationship. So there's a certain line that I wouldn't cross in being informal with them, but definitely do get to know them as people as well as your faculty.
It sounds like very good advice. So while we are an informal culture, a university setting is still a formal setting and a professional setting, and it's kind of that first view onto professional life that students get an experience with. Okay, let's go to our next online question. Hind from Palestine and our group in American Space, Gitega, are both asking about English proficiency. If students don't speak English fluently, how can they still attend U.S. college? And how can students improve their English language skills at university? Are there enough English language clubs, for example, or what means are there? Let me ask our 2 Universally panelists, and can I start with you, Michael?
Go back to Emily.
Sorry, we seem to be having a few connection problems. Emily, may I ask you the same question?
Sure. So we provide placement testing once international students arrive to test their English language proficiency. And depending on the results of that, we will either place students within our English as a Second Language program to provide additional language support, or they will continue on with their traditional classes. And in terms of added support, we have a really great student services system that's in place to help provide additional academic and tutoring support as needed. We also have what we call a Conversation Partners program, where international students are partnered with students and faculty and staff on campus to have conversations and practice their English as needed and as desired. So we have a number of platforms in place to give students the opportunity to continue practicing their English language skills.
Okay, let me ask our two students a question. Did you, without naming names, nothing specific, but were there students in your classes where you thought, okay, his or her English is not quite there yet, but it will come? And did the university do things to help students, or was everyone already? I assume that not all international students have the same facility when they first arrive. Is that right, Shaun?
It's a bit hard for me to speak to that because I was in a lot of humanities-based classes. So I think I didn't see that many other international students taking those classes because they were writing intensive if they weren't already fairly proficient in English. But I do have other friends outside of a class setting who kind of have started off at maybe not so proficient of a point with English, but I've seen them progress over those 4 years. A lot of it is, I think, some of it is on the university again, but a lot of it is really on you and how willing you are to get out there and mix with other Americans. I think that's the biggest thing that helps.
Thank you. Alina?
Well, I have also mostly been in liberal arts, writing intensive classes during my time at Duke. However, I did meet a few international students who struggled with English, and I completely agree with Shaun that this is mostly on you to get out of your comfort zone, and even if you don't initially feel as comfortable or welcome as you would in your own language environment, to go out there and meet as many people as possible, and first and foremost, try to make as many American friends as you can, because it is through informal communication that language develops best. So this would be my best piece of advice.
Okay, so it can be a challenge, but it's definitely possible, and universities have lots of programs in place to address those challenges. Let's go to another online question from this time from IRC Kigali in Rwanda. They would like to know more about international student orientation. So specifically, what happened during that first time to sort of get you up to speed with what's going on in the U.S. Alina, do you?
Yeah, so the international student orientation at Duke included, well, first of all, you got to be there a few days earlier than all the rest of the students who were Americans, which I think helped because you can get to know the campus and you can walk around and meet other people from different countries across the globe who are in a similar situation to yours, so it was great for making friends. There were a bunch of activities such as contests and trivia and like get to know each other icebreaker type of stuff, so that was helpful to me, and I met some of the people that I'm still close friends with during that week. And it also included, I believe, a cultural orientation of sorts, where they would, for example, tell you about what is customary in the United States, how people usually communicate with each other for anybody who might not have had any exposure to that previously.
Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Did they talk about safety?
Yeah. So definitely, because Washington University is in St. Louis, which has one of the higher rates in gun violence in the country. So that was definitely something they kind of talked about. But a big part of it was kind of emphasizing a lot of common sense principles. Don't go somewhere that's not familiar after dark if you're alone. But also talking about the university support system. They have well, obviously there's the Washington University Police Department for one, but they also have this blue light system, which is a series of like posts, I suppose, located around campus, where if you're feeling threatened for some reason, you can kind of hit a button on those posts, and that goes to an intercom. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So the orientation was pretty well-rounded and gave you a chance to really get to know the campus, but also kind of wider life in the United States. Right. Is that fair to say? Yep. Okay. Let me turn. I think we have Michael now online by phone. Michael, can I ask you the same question about the specifics of the orientation at University of North Carolina, Wilmington?
Yes, with respect to safety or more broadly?
I think more broadly and also safety, if you would.
Okay, yes. Over the first couple of days before the semester begins, we do a very, very intensive orientation session to make sure that students feel comfortable, not only on the immigration side of things and the compliance side of things, but of course with the transition to studying here in the U.S. In terms of safety, I would just simply agree with everything that Shaun said. I think that he absolutely hit the nail on the head. Really, really key points. The collaboration between campus police and the local police, be it city or state in some cases, and a very, very robust blue light system or safety system to make sure that students feel safe at any time, day or night on campus. But again, situational awareness is really, really important.
Thank you very much. Emily, anything you would like to add?
Just echoing what has been said previously, the safety factor is also key for us as well, and in the interaction between the students and our public safety professionals that are on campus, then of course local police in the region, and making sure that students are aware and are comfortable contacting those individuals as needed.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have a question from the American Center in Gitega, Burundi. A few online viewers are asking about activities outside the classroom. Very interesting. How can students balance academics with extracurricular activities and employment? And I know that both Alina and Shaun have done exciting and fun things outside the classroom. Let me turn to you, Alina. Do you want to talk about that balance?
Yeah, so the work-play balance can be really hard to find, especially at academically rigorous schools like Duke, which has unfortunately been my experience. So there's a joke going around campus that there's sleep, there's academics, and there's social life, and you can only choose 2 out of these 3. And I would say that it's fairly correct. My main problem has been that there's just so much stuff going on campus all the time that it is extremely hard to pinpoint something that you're interested in to kind of balance your classes with the rest of the extracurriculars. So for example, my favorite thing to do at Duke has been the Model UN Club, which is like a debate geared towards international relations. And that is fairly time consuming in that we do 2 conferences a year and travel around the country, so it can be hard to balance with the rest of my classes and responsibilities.
In terms of the Model UN, is it different being an international student as part of the Model UN, or were you simply one of the group?
Oh, I mean, I always get to represent Russia whenever we get a position that is related to that country, but I feel like it is different and beneficial in many ways because despite the language barrier, I feel like I have a cultural perspective that is fairly different from what my peers who are American, who are also in that club might have. So that has been an input that I've been able to provide for them. Thank
you very much. Shaun?
Yeah, so I would say actually, yes, that is probably one of the biggest challenges of a U.S. education, just balancing your academic experience and your extracurricular experience. So my personal experience was that I actually overcommitted to both initially. So those 2 out of the 3, sleep was the one that was missing for me. But I think it's really rewarding, and you should never let your academics be compromised because of what you're doing outside of the classroom, since that's the main reason you're there. But extracurriculars are also a really big part of their big learning point in college, and I think it's really important to try and do at least 1 or 2. So my 2 activities, my biggest activities were, the first one was the slam or performance poetry group that I was involved in, and that was something I was involved in earlier on. It's a combination of both writing and performance, and because of the practice and kind of creative requirements of slam poetry, that took up a lot of my time. So I think personally finding that balance was really about just prioritizing and learning to find spare time in the day where, for example, I would rehearse poems while walking to class and just making use of those little moments. The other thing I was involved in was Greek life. So I was in a fraternity, which is sort of a social organization with a group of men sharing the same values. And that was also a big time commitment, but in a different way, because that was more social. And so as a result, I think it was just knowing how to kind of make myself sit down and study when I could be hanging out with my friends instead, basically. Yeah.
Let me ask a follow-up question. Are you both going to take these experiences with you in the future? I mean, are these experiences things that they've obviously defined your college life, but are they going to inform your life going on? Shaun, about poetry, is this now a part of you? Are you going to do this kind of thing for others as you go forward?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say that I will be doing performance poetry for the rest of my life, but I will definitely say that it's going to be an integral part of my life. I could not imagine not having done performance poetry in college. So a lot of the soft skills like presenting and the confidence that it teaches you, and also just an appreciation of other people's life stories and art. That's something that I don't think I could have picked up anywhere else, and so that's incredibly important to me.
And the friends you made in the fraternity, are they now for life?
Friends for life, brothers for life. That's what we're supposed to say.
That's fantastic. Alina?
So I would say that my extracurricular experience have affected me just as much as the classes that I've taken at Duke, in that they have helped shape my professional as well as personal interests, and most importantly, have allowed me, given me access to so many people that I would otherwise never have met had we not been, say, in the same club at Duke or doing the same volunteering activity off campus. So it has definitely been a transformative experience, and even though, as Shaun mentioned earlier, academics is the reason you are at a U.S. college, I would definitely not sacrifice the social / extracurricular part of your experience, because it can be just as important and formative.
Thank you. And every school has that. Let's turn quickly to our two school representatives. Emily, can you say anything about that balance between academics and extracurriculars?
Sure. It definitely is a tough one, but it's an important one. We don't want students to burn out academically by working so intensely on their academics. You need to have some of that fun and social piece to all of it. And in addition, the social activities are a great way to practice your English as an international student, but also make really great friends and contacts with students who may be in a completely different track academically that you might not ever have really come in contact with. So it's a great way to really expand that network.
Thank you, Emily. And Michael, does the university actually promote extracurricular activities?
We do, and most do. I think that it's consistently a surprise when international students are availing themselves of opportunities on U.S. campuses, that they find that there's a club or an organization that allows them not only to do whatever it is that they enjoy doing at home, but as Emily said, to do it in the company of domestic students, of students who are from the U.S. that share those interests. It's a very, very powerful tool.
Thank you very much. That excellent answers. Now let's go back to our group gathered in Moscow for some questions. Moscow, do you have a question?
My question is for Alina. Alina, have you ever taken a class which you didn't like? If yes, what did you do?
Excellent question. Have you ever taken a class that you didn't like?
That's a tough one, because Duke has a lot of really good classes. Let me think about it for a second.
Or, a related question could be a class that you were forced to take, obliged to take, that you didn't like. That wasn't an elective. There are many requirements as well, right?
Yes, so not all of the classes are electives, and that you cannot choose everything that you take. So Duke requires you to take at least 3 foreign language classes that are not English, for all of you international students out there. And also requires you to take, even if you are a liberal arts major like me, you are required to take at least 2 natural science classes. So I'm currently in the process of covering that one, and my first one was a neuroscience course, which it was an introduction into brain science, and while it was incredibly interesting, I also took it at the same time as a statistics class and another core class in my major that was kind of hard. So that was not a good experience in terms of how, I guess I didn't like the class because it didn't fit well into my schedule, and it also dealt with natural sciences, which I am naturally less skilled with. So that would be one example.
Okay, Shaun, anything?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say I've taken a few classes that I'm not the biggest fan of, but I think a lot of it goes back to like the professor-student interaction. Classes with a lot of professor-student interaction are going to be better. Some of the classes that have not been the best have been really big lecture classes of 200 students on neuroscience or like statistics, and it's hard to get that like personalized attention or like really understand the material like based on without putting in some work of your own. Yeah.
Both very excellent answers and examples. I can tell you from my own experience. So I was a political science major, and and I had to do a full year of advanced calculus. I had to do science courses. I was at a school that required that, and I have to say, calculus was difficult for me. At the time, I think I thought less of it than I do now, but the science courses that I also thought would be difficult, I loved so much that were a huge surprise. And so I think being open-minded to all courses and to the chance that you're being given to be taught by sort of excellent professors who want you to learn something from everything, that affected me personally. Let's go to another, to ask Moscow, do you have a second question?
Yes, yeah.
Please, thank you.
Yeah, in terms of master degree, do students have time for, say, spare projects or personal projects like startups or something like that? Aside of studying, is it even possible to work on one of those during the master degrees?
It's an excellent question. Would you even have time to do a real sort of a completely personal project like a startup or something, so different? We always hear about students that do it, and I agree with our colleague who asked the questions. It seems impossible. Reality, myth? Shaun? What do you think?
Again, I think it's about time management at the end of the day, and you have to pace yourself. Don't get yourself in too deep with too many things. Decide what it is you want to do and kind of have a clear idea of that, and find mentors who can tell you how they did it, and it becomes possible. So I personally didn't do a startup or anything, but I've been involved in a bunch of research around campus. I had a pretty big thesis project that I did in junior and senior year of college, so third and fourth year, and that was on nationalism in Kenya, and it required a lot of time outside of the classroom and a lot of my summertime and my time during winter break as well. But I think if you apply yourself carefully and don't spread yourself too thin, it's definitely possible.
Alina?
Well, thank you for your question. First of all, I think it was a great one. As I mentioned earlier, Duke has a lot of social living groups, and it comes to mind now because one of them actually centers around entrepreneurship. So there's a group on Duke's campus that specifically welcomes students who want to do a personal project like a startup. So while it would be, I've never tried it, and I feel like it would be an extremely difficult task to accomplish. But as Shaun has mentioned, you have access to so many resources that you otherwise would never have access to outside of college or university, that if you really are set on a certain goal of, say, starting your own company, you have people to help you out, and you may succeed given appropriate time management.
Okay, time management is it. Let me ask from a university standpoint, Michael, would a school support that kind of big project that has the potential to possibly take students away from academic work?
Absolutely so. With the caveat, I'm not sure about taking away from the academic work, but I think that especially in a master's or in a doctoral level program, students are working on research projects in individual classes or a thesis or a dissertation, something on a much grander scale. And many times the outside project can dovetail nicely with a course requirement, and it provides a good avenue for creative thought. And I think students work through the time management issues, especially as graduate students in the U.S., where something like that would be possible and would be encouraged, maybe through a Center for Innovation, a Center for Entrepreneurship, or a type of focused residence hall living environment with an innovation or entrepreneurial theme.
Thank you very much. Emily, what about at the college level?
I would completely agree. The creativity and entrepreneurial spirit is definitely one that's encouraged. But also, given the resources that are at a student's disposal not being afraid to ask for help and added support, and being able to utilize those resources to be able to manage your time effectively, and also kind of dive deeper into the creative project that you're interested in.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. It sounds like students have amazing opportunities all around. Now let's go back to online questions. We have a question that just came in. What are professors' office hours and how do they work? What is that system? Alina, what was your experience with office hours?
Office hours are a system where a professor assigns several hours per week that you can go into their office without scheduling an appointment and talk through any of the problems that you might have in a class. And I found it really helpful with classes that I've struggled with, which are more on the STEM side. So my statistics course, the neuroscience class that I took, professors were both really welcoming, warm individuals who were happy to meet with students after hours and talk through anything that you might struggle with. So definitely peruse office hours, great opportunity to not only get a better grade, but get to know your professor well.
So Shaun, do people ever go to office hours even if they don't have anything specific to ask?
Yeah, I would say, you should have maybe a bit of an ask or something that you're interested in talking about with the professor. Don't go just for fun, but at the same time, it really helps you build a relationship with a professor, which can be useful later on if you're trying to do research with them, or if you're trying to get a recommendation letter from them down the line. They know who you are and what you're doing beyond just the classroom in that case.
So professors are actually happy to see you during office hours, is that right?
Yeah, well, most are.
Okay. We have our next question comes from the EducationUSA Center in Abuja, Nigeria. The questioner asks, what is it like to live in a dormitory? How did you deal with roommate challenges? That's an excellent question. Shaun, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, sure. I'm personally biased, but I think dormitory life is great. It really helps you build relationships with the people who are just around you, because you're around people 24/7. And as an international student, I think that's what you really need. You want to just be dropped in and really have an opportunity to socialize with just this huge array of people all around you, because it's not organized by club or social interest a lot of the time. And so you get to build a really wide network. As far as roommate issues go, I think a lot of it is just, it comes down to speaking with your roommate about things that you think are problematic, because sometimes I think the biggest problems arise from when there are expectations on both sides that neither side realizes they're missing. So just open communication and being really forthright about what you think problems are.
Very, very interesting. Alina?
Well, I've had to kind of build off of what you said about roommate situation. I've had the same roommate throughout college because we were assigned randomly my freshman year and became such good friends. We decided to room together every year after that. And even though we've definitely had some of our rough patches, the most important thing about your roommate relationship is communication. So you don't have to be best friends with your roommate or even be friends with them. But you need to base the relationship off of self-respect and respect for the other person. So communication, respect, is a great recipe for a good roommate relationship.
Thank you both. Sounds like very good advice. Let me turn to you, Emily, quickly and ask, can students choose their roommates? How does that work?
So yes and no. So there is an opportunity to identify a person ahead of time that you'd like to room with. Typically for incoming students, this isn't as common unless you have a friend from high school or from previous experiences that is also going to the same school, and the two of you can room together. Otherwise, it's usually a random pairing. But after that first year, as Alina had said, if you liked the living situation that you had and the roommate that you were matched with, you certainly can choose to live with them again. That's a great story to hear that the pairing worked. Not always is that the case, but it's always nice to see when a situation like that does occur.
Michael, let me ask, so how often, I mean, does it generally work well? Do roommate situations generally work out from the university's perspective?
It does generally work well, and I think again for international students, it's a big surprise when they see just how serious higher education institutions are in the U.S. about trying to make that work. All of this extracurricular focus, all of the resources that are devoted to, hiring RAs in the halls, supporting residence hall life professionals, having RHCs, residence hall coordinators, supervising staff that are available to help mitigate these types of occurrences. The devotion that U.S. Higher Ed makes towards student affairs and deans of students' offices, there is a ton of support for international students, and they just need to make sure that they're not afraid about asking early in the process before things get too far out of control.
Okay, well, thank you both very much. That's it certainly makes me almost want to go back to living in a dorm. So let us take our next question from the world online. We have Sagar Rasam asking, I understand plagiarism can be an issue. How can one avoid it? And how can one get academic help in writing in case of a language barrier? And I can imagine, Shaun, do you want to start with that?
Sure. So I think that one of the most important things is just being, again, open communication. So if you have worries about plagiarism, talk with your professor. Ask them what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. They will really appreciate it if you go to them and talk and ask about this, because professors, one of the biggest no-nos is just plagiarizing. You can, at best, you're going to get a failing grade on your assignment. At worst, you're going to completely flunk the class, and no one wants that. So I think that just being talking to your professor and making sure that you're not copying wholesale from websites, and reach out to your writing center as well. Most schools, I think, have a writing center that they can talk to about how to cite sources and how to reference them. Just reach out, yeah.
Alina, any words of advice?
Well, like Shaun said, almost any school in the U.S. will have a writing lab available, and they are used to international students coming in and asking not just about plagiarism, but general writing tips and how to make your writing and your papers better. And I think these labs are really successful in helping people get higher grades and improve their writing. That being said, my best advice to all international students would be to, if you are not used to citing your sources, cite as many as you can, because I personally know an international friend of mine who got reported by a professor for a case of plagiarism that was unintentional. So that was a case of miscommunication between a professor and a student that could have been avoided had either of them reached out to one another and to talk in depth about plagiarism and how it might be an issue in writing.
So communication and specific information is key.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. It sounds like very good advice. We have another online question, and this goes, I think, first to Shaun. It's about Greek life. Can you tell us more about Greek life in a fraternity, and what that is?
So Greek life has a different presence at different universities. At some universities, it's banned completely. At some, it's a really big part of the culture. Basically, there's fraternities which are normally men only, and sororities which are women only. There are also some co-ed fraternities that accept both men and women. And those are a lot. Basically, you can think of them as, in a sense, social organizations or groups of friends that center around a common set of values or a common mission of some kind. So you do have, for example, some professional fraternities which focus on business and networking opportunities like Delta Sigma Pi and Alpha Kappa Psi. But you also have social fraternities which are more oriented towards building you up holistically. Again, a lot of the stuff you find in the US about having a rounded experience. And my personal experience with that was I found a really great group of guys. I was part of Alpha Delta Phi at WashU, and they were really supportive. They're people who inspire me to be a better person, and I'm really happy to have known them. Yeah.
It sounds like a great experience. Let me ask our university representatives. Michael, can I start with you? What's the relationship between the university and fraternities on campus?
Even though most fraternities and sororities have a kind of a national chapter that maybe governs or influences the day-to-day activities, typically student affairs, again, or student life from the university administrator perspective has a very, very active relationship with fraternities and sororities and the leaders of the individual groups. And I think that one thing that I would add in addition to what Shaun said is it's very easy maybe to focus occasionally on the social aspect or a negative aspect that you might see in the news, but it's easy to overlook the concept and the dedication to volunteerism and to community service. Many fraternities and sororities do a very, very, very strong job, a very important job of helping to bridge this traditional town and gown gap between the university campus and how they interface with the local community, and do very, very, very strong and well-meaning projects.
Thank you very much. That's inspiring to see the public service aspect. Emily, how is it at La Roche?
So actually, given the size of La Roche, we don't have Greek life. Just given how small of a size our campus is, we don't have any of the social aspects of fraternities and sororities. We do have some of the academic focused fraternities. But I will say, just generally looking at the work that Greek life does, as was mentioned before, it not only the community service and the volunteerism is spectacular, but just the relationships that are formed among the members and how strong of a bond that continues to be maintained throughout their years at school and beyond. It's truly remarkable.
Thank you very much. Excellent to hear. Our next question from an online viewer. Is it easy to find student study groups in the U.S.? Did you study with other Americans? What was that like? Very good question. Alina.
Well, it's not a structured process. I mean, finding a study group, you just kind of, you enter your classes and you might already know some of the people who are taking your class, or you might not have any friends. But then there are so many group projects in American classrooms that you kind of end up being friends with some people in your classes. So I personally like to study alone because it helps me concentrate. But whenever I feel like being social and studying at the same time, I might hit up some of my friends and go together to a library and sit yeah, I have done that in particular with friends who are the same major as me and are taking the same classes. And sometimes it can be really helpful, like sharing notes and insight into like certain concepts that the class covers.
Thank you. Shaun, what was your experience? Did anyone ever approach you to form a study group?
Yeah, I mean, I've had some study groups for individual classes. I don't think I've had long-standing study groups, but pretty much what Alina said, honestly. Like, sometimes it's helpful, and you can go looking for it if you think that it's helpful to you, but sometimes you just want to study alone, yeah. But
it's not a formal thing, right? It's not the university that's creating study groups. It's students that just decide to get together or not. Is that right? Well,
I think that's mostly right. There is one caveat I just realized because, so WashU, I'm not sure if this is true of other schools, but WashU has, for some of the STEM classes, organized peer help sessions. But I think that might be something that's unique to my university. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Alina, any experience with that or?
I've never had a peer tutor, but there is a program at Duke that provides, that you can enroll in as an upperclassman, which provides assistance to people, mostly in STEM-related classes, who struggle with certain concepts and understanding class material. So it is completely free of charge. So volunteers just like donate their time to help other students with their classes.
So study group versus more formal assistance. How is that from the university perspective? Michael, is there, are there formal programs in addition to the informal ones?
There are the informal ones, of course, happen quite naturally. I think through classes. I think the shared experience of trying to get through a difficult topic makes for very fast friends. But from the university perspective, I think both Alina and Shaun mentioned resources that we offer here and at UNC Wilmington as well, in terms of mentoring programs or peer tutors, or even getting international host family programs together to help with the assimilation more so than the academic content.
Thank you very much. Emily, anything you'd like to add?
No, just that, we also have a lot of those same types of services to help with the academic side of things, but we do see a lot of those work group study sessions that do just develop naturally through that shared work of taking the class together.
Thank you very much. Our next online question: what kind of opportunities are there to do research on campus? Very interesting. Alina, do you want to start with that one?
Sure. Well, there's just tons of them. Duke in particular has a program called BAS Connections, which is a student-professor collaboration, which my best friend did actually after her freshman year. So it provides an opportunity for students and professors to unite into clusters based on common interests that they might have. So for example, one of the more popular ones at Duke is about the opioid epidemic, and students from interdisciplinary fields can contribute their experiences, and professors can guide them to successful research projects. In addition to that, there's more traditional pathways like doing a thesis with an advisor, or even taking a class that centers around a research project.
Thank you. Shaun?
Yeah, so pretty much what Alina said as well. There's sometimes smaller programs. I was in one that let me do some neuroscience research in my second year, which was an extension of this class I enrolled in my first year. But there are also a lot of opportunities through like standard channels, even if you miss those. Just as I mentioned earlier, going to your office hours, your professor's office hours, and getting to know them is a great step into doing research with them potentially.
Thank you both. Another question from online for our two university representatives. Can students return to their home country for a visit during the school year? And how does that work? What are those experiences like? Emily, do you have students returning home during the school year?
We do. We have quite a few students that will travel back home for a variety of different reasons. And we do encourage all students to check in with our International Student Services team as they're planning those trips, just to address any kind of questions or concerns that that might need to be addressed, or any kind of immigration or legal aspects related to that. But we do have students that travel back and forth, and we have a number of international students that travel domestically throughout the United States during their time as a student, and we actively encourage that. And in terms of other international travel, we have a study abroad program that all students are able to participate in. It's a short-term kind of 2-week program, and we actively recruit international students to participate in that as well. And we work with them to help them kind of work through that process as well, and encourage them to travel to other parts of the world through that experience.
Thank you very much. And Michael, anything you'd like to add?
No, I would just like to reinforce again what Emily said, that it is really, really, really important, whether you're on a J or an F visa, that you stop in to see your advisor in the International Students and Scholar Services office before you're traveling home. Normally, there's a kind of there's some paperwork that needs to be done. Make sure that your signature is up to date on your I-20, for example, and you shouldn't have any problems at all.
Thank you both very much. Unfortunately, we are almost out of time. I'd like to ask our panelists, do you have any final thoughts that you would like to offer our viewers? Shaun?
Coming to the US was an amazing experience, just in terms of not only the academics, but the extracurricular opportunities and the friends I've made. So if you're thinking about it, I would strongly suggest you do it.
Yeah, I would just like to say that if there's anyone out there doubting whether or not you should come to the United States for an educational experience like going to a 4-year college, please do it if you have the chance, because it has, my time at Duke has definitely been one of the best periods in my entire life. The impact that it has had on me is incomparable to any other experience that I've ever had, and I would always make the same choice of coming to Duke again. So do it if you can.
Thank you both. Michael?
You are absolutely welcome here.
Oh, I think we may have lost Emily. Thank you for joining us, Alina, Shaun, Michael, and Emily. I'd also like to thank all of our viewing groups around the world for joining, including the American Center in Bauchi, Nigeria, Ocosingo, Mexico, the IRC in Kigali, Rwanda, the Martin Luther King American Corner in Gitega, Burundi, Education USA San Pedro Sula in Honduras, and the American Center in Sokoto, Nigeria, American Space Managua, Nicaragua, the Information Resource Center in Antananarivo, Madagascar, the Fulbright Commission in Belgium, Education USA La Paz, Bolivia, the American Center in Guadalajara, Mexico, American Corner, Abuja, Nigeria, and Education USA in Paraguay. You can find more information about studying in the USA by visiting the Education USA website at www.educationusa.state.gov. There you can find information on the 5 steps to U.S. study located in Education USA Center in your country, one of 418 around the world, learn about both in-person and virtual upcoming events, research financial aid opportunities, and much more. Thank you, and please join us for future Education USA interactive virtual web chats.